Yep.
I like the Nikes today, Matt.
Thank you. My wife has given up on my obsession with sneakers. She's given up on it, and so she just kind of like leans into it a little bit now, or lets me lean into it more.
Right.
I guess, really. She just, anyway, so lets is kind of a strong word. I mean, that makes her sound controlling. She's not controlling.
Tolerant.
Yeah, so anytime she buys me a gift card, 9 times out of 10, it's going towards shoes. And so, yeah, I saw these guys. It was my Father's Day gift card, and I was like, I would love to get some classic Nikes rolling again.
You did it, man.
I did.
Do you trade? Do you trade them? Like trade your shoes?
I don't trade. No. I actually have too many. I could do with throwing some on eBay and selling some shoes. I have. I'm embarrassed to say how many shoes I have.
There's like whole networks of that. Like apparently, once you get into it, it becomes a little addictive.
Yeah, no, my son has always been, my middle one has always been this little entrepreneur at heart, and when he was like 12 years old, he started buying and selling Nikes and trading and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. And so
it's lucrative, man.
Yeah. And it was funny because he would get a pair and he's like, yeah, I don't like the way these look. And he'd go and he'd like, get them all shined up and like do his thing. And, he'd get shoe paint and he'd be in there messing around. And then all of a sudden, hey, Dad, can you take me somewhere? And then it's so sketchy. Like I pull up onto these streets, right? And these random guys would just kind of.
I'm sorry.
These random guys would just kind of like walk in the middle of the road, and they'd be like looking around like this, and my son gets out of the car, and at the time I had this kind of like SUV, and it looked kind of like, I don't know, it didn't have.
This is unmarked SUV. It was suspect.
The whole scene looked like a drug deal. Right. And so, but anyway, there was one time, this is his last time that he actually ever traded shoes ever again. His mom and I were somewhere. I think we were on a date, or I don't know where we were, but we were not home. And this guy that was staying with us, at the time, I won't say his name, but he was there with my son, and my son arranged this shoe deal, right? But he arranged.
It sounds bad, just to say
I know.
that.
Why is he not mailing?
So sketchy.
Why is he handing it off like
little Nike shoe mafia or something? And so he arranges this shoe deal, but on our street, right? Not in front of our house, but on our street,
end of the block.
Right. And then so he and this guy that was staying with us, they walk up to the end of the street, and this car pulls up. Like 3 or 4 guys get out, and they say, "Drop the shoes." No joke. They're about to rob my son.
No way.
My son drops the shoes and runs. I mean, and then I think the other guy was not that far behind him. Or no, the other guy said run, and then my Ethan ran, and then Ethan's like, yeah, no more shoe deals.
That's terrible.
Isn't that nuts?
Yeah, that is.
Yeah.
I don't know where that came. Like, it's just wild that Nike created this like second market street culture accidentally. I got to get this out of my system. I watched that movie Air with like Matt Damon.
Was it good?
It was good.
It was so good. You watched it too, Stephanie?
Yeah, I can't wait to see it.
Did you know there were so many surprising things about Nike's Jordan launch that I had no idea about.
Yeah, I didn't know any of it.
So it was like Matt Damon and Jason Bateman. But anyway, I thought the wildest thing was that. So looking at your like almost all white shoes here, Matt. So the NBA was really strict, apparently, on how much color you could have on the shoe.
That's the first thing I noticed when I looked at the shoes.
It had to be like 50% white or more.
Or more, yeah.
So what they did to differentiate was the creative director at Nike is like, we're going to make the Jordan 1s red, like predominantly red, and we're just going to pay the $5,000 fine per game, and our shoe's going to stand out. And it worked. I mean, it was like a massive, massive success launching the Jordan. because it was the stand out on the court. So
That's so freaking
I know,
cool.
yeah. It was like just a little bit, pay that cost up front, and it
Cost of doing business.
Yeah, exactly. So there was just cool, innovative stuff like that.
Yeah, just chalk it up to good marketing. I mean, it's
Exactly, and just
Take it out of the marketing
literally
budget.
going against the grain, like doing the thing that no one else is going to do. That was kind of it was cool and inspiring.
It was.
and it paid off. Didn't Jordan want to do Adidas at first?
Yeah,
He
yeah.
wanted to do Adidas. And
Well,
his-
everybody wanted Adidas, right?
Yeah.
They had the market share, which is crazy to think,
Yeah, and Jordan's dad's like, you're a fool if you don't take this. If you don't take this money.
Yeah, no doubt. Which understandably, it was
His mom.
Was it Converse that had the main?
That's what I was
market?
wondering. What you guys were talking about, I couldn't remember if it was Converse or Adidas.
I think it was Adidas.
Really?
I
Okay.
heard Jordan talking about that whole shoe deal and the documentary that had come out, and he said
They wanted him for sure.
Yeah,
Like, they made that
and his
apparent.
dad said, "You're a damn fool if you don't take that." So his parents actually made him do the deal.
Yeah, yeah.
And yeah. That's thanks, mom and dad, right?
Yeah, and according to the movie too, who knows what the truth is, but his mom was really the negotiator. Like she was really amazing lady, way ahead of her time.
Involved
cool.
in getting him. That was the first time an athlete had ever gotten like a cut of or like a residual from a shoe deal like that.
A royalty, yeah. From,
Yeah, yeah.
Did you guys ever watch The Last Dance?
I did.
Series?
No.
You got to see if you're a fan of that. You got to see The Last Dance. He actually talks about. So they interview all these people, and they interview actually Jordan's mom. And Jordan's mom reads a letter that Jordan wrote to her while he was in college at Duke, saying, "Hey mom, love you. Can you send me some money?
No way.
I'm sorry, North Carolina. That's what I meant. Sorry, Jordan. I did not mean Duke. Yeah. So it was. But anyway, there's the content in that thing it's extremely insightful. There's a lot of stuff I learned about Jordan and about the Bulls team. As a kid, I wasn't paying attention to the politics and all this all the shit that they were going through as a team. I was just watching the games and enjoying the games, and getting all that insight. It was pretty interesting.
I'm going to go watch it now.
Yeah, it was really good.
Well, I think Scott showed us we watched the first 3 or 4. How many episodes is
I think
the
it was
series?
like 6 or 7.
We watched 3 or something with Scott, and yeah, Mike was just almost. I mean, definitely in a burdensome way, competitive, where he was almost hurting the people around him because he wanted to win so bad.
Right.
It was wild to see, man. It was super wild to see.
Yeah. I would imagine. He punched Steve Kerr.
Did he really?
He punched too?
Steve Kerr.
Oh.
Yeah.
Unbelievable, man.
During
But
practice.
There's you could literally see the cost for greatness. That was very, you know what I mean? That was very apparent. People say that, but for Michael Jordan, it was a real thing. It was a real thing.
Absolutely. And oddly enough, when you hear him talk about it, that was the way he showed he cared. That was his way of caring about you was busting your chops. And
Well, I'm sure that team wouldn't trade it for anything now.
Welcome to the Legacy Angel Network Venture Lounge, where nothing ventured is nothing changed. For Matt Helmentaler, press 1. For member services, press 2. For real raw startup stories, press 3. For all other questions or concerns, please wait on the line in our
Good evening, everyone. I'm Matt Helmentaler, and you're listening to Venture Lounge, after-hour conversations with founders and investors. These are the stories, insights, and conversations that you aren't going to find on the company website. Because the real lessons you learn in the startup world, the risks you take as an entrepreneur, the highs and the lows, the moments in your journey when no one else believes in you right before you break through. Those are the moments that you just have to hear for yourself. So grab a drink and listen in to the men and women who are changing the world. Welcome to the Venture Lounge.
Welcome back to Venture Lounge, everybody. Nothing ventured, nothing changed. I'm Connor Sherman, creative director here at Legacy Angel Network, and I'm on the couch, as always, with our founder, Matt Helmentaler. Matt, what's up?
Hello. How's it going?
Tell us about our friend across from us today.
Yeah, well, Stefanie Lattner. She is one of our are members here at Legacy Angel Network, but she's actually much more than that. She's become a phenomenal just kind of advisor to us. So as most people know on the Space Coast, angel investing in general is kind of, I don't want to say it's a new concept, but this type of investing is pretty new on the Space Coast.
We're on the bleeding edge here, for sure.
It's done it's been done over the years in small little pockets, but in rooms that no one knows about, stuff like that. So when we kind of came on the scene, we were all kind of new to it as well, and trying to surround ourselves with professionals that could kind of guide our people, guide our members, guide us. And Steffi and I, we met last year.
Yeah.
It was last year, and we sat down at lunch, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, this lady is a wellspring of information and experience and stuff." So, so she's just been instrumental not only in connections, but in education and meeting with our staff and saying, "Hey, this is how we did it when we did this, this, and this." And so, I don't want to take away and talk about all of her background. I'll let her do that, but just an amazing lady. Loves people, loves the community.
Yes, definitely.
Us. I mean, she's just awesome. She's a great partner in this endeavor. So
welcome to the podcast.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks
thank
for
you,
taking
guys.
the time.
yeah, absolutely.
Start by giving us your background, Stefanie. Where are you from? Where'd you grow up?
Yep. So I grew up in Pittsburgh, spent most of my time there, and then just over the course of my career, moved all over the country at different points in time. But went to school for first electrical engineering, and then I got a master's in bioengineering. Worked for a while, and then got my master's from the University of Michigan, which is a great school. That brought me back to Pittsburgh. I grew up mainly through medical devices, that industry. But when I left one company, it was a company called Respironics that was acquired by Philips Medical. I ended up working for a seed fund in Pittsburgh, and that was just an amazing experience because kind of like what's happening here at our place now, you just see a breadth of companies, and with that, you just learn exponentially so fast. So the more you're exposed to, the more you learn. So I got to work for them for about 4 years, and then actually was recruited to come down here to Florida with a similar venture. They were backed by a different type of financing structure, but they had the goal of doing the same thing, starting companies and growing them to get very big, very fast. That was their model. And along the way, worked for a few of those companies and then ventured off into my own startups. And so I've been doing my own startups for the last few years, and then met you guys.
Very cool. What was the scene like in Pittsburgh, Stefanie? I mean, is it different than what's going on in here?
Yeah, it really is different, but they've got like a 40-year head start on everybody. So, yeah. So, I mean, Pittsburgh was one of the cities that I think was the first in the nation to really face a crisis where you had to change the whole dynamic of the city. So, back in the 50s and 60s when they were known for steel, that's all of the kind of like Detroit is going through now. They have all the auto manufacturers and then all of the ancillary companies that support that industry. The same thing with Pittsburgh. Way back in the day, everything supported this steel industry. But when that went by the wayside and was taken over by other countries, the city really was faced with how do we reinvent ourselves. And fortunately, at the time, the state of Pennsylvania put in a venture capital model specifically for seed funding and specifically for tech companies that can grow the economy, grow in terms of jobs, grow in terms of industries, and just diversify more. So that model's been in motion for a long time, and I got to work for one of the organizations in Pittsburgh that was part of that model.
Incredible. Yeah, that's cool to hear about the pivot from, obvious pivots that had to happen. Especially
huge pivots. And now you're starting to hear more and more. We're heavily focused on the defense industry and really trying to, there's a lot of people, in the county that are focused on, hey, that's healthy and it's great, but we also need some other industries. And, Michigan is the same way. And, there's a number of states that are now going through that growth. Like I said, we just maybe had a little head start there.
What do you think the key to the growth was over there? And as you got involved in that community what do you think the key was to the growth? Was it a multifaceted kind of communal attack, or was it like, what did it look like?
You described it perfectly. I was going to say that it was a common mission. So it was a common goal, common mission. Everyone, at least from my perspective, seemed to agree that, oh yeah, this is healthy, it's the right thing to do, we need to do it. And so there were lots of different groups tackling the problems in a lot of different ways, but everybody had the same shared mission. And so, yeah, I think the way you described it was perfect.
So was it, I mean, when you say multiple groups, are you talking about like local government? I mean, like what groups?
Yeah, so there were, same kind of deal there as here. There was a nascent angel group that started, but that definitely wasn't the first group that popped up. So, their model is a little different because there is a little more government funding that's involved, and it's considered a private-public partnership. And so that became the model where, look, you'll get a little bit of money from the public sector, but you're expected to go get matching funds from the private sector. And so there was maybe a forced collaboration that had to happen, which turned out to be a good thing.
Yeah. There's in Brevard County, I don't know that there's any PPP initiatives happening, but we tried something years ago over in Palm Bay where we tried to do a public-private partnership and do essentially build up kind of a business factory and go get matching funds private, go over here, and it just never
came to fruition.
No, it never came to fruition. I don't think the idea is ahead of Brevard County. I think it just, for me, it just seems like some cities are more, I'm not saying Palm Bay is not, but
some areas are more open to it than others. Yeah, some people view that, and Florida's a different beast where there's a lot of pride in being scrappy and building your business from the ground floor up, not getting help from anybody. Right. And that's maybe a cultural thing that over time we've got to realize that, again, back to the shared mission. If there's a shared mission for a community to really change its stripes a little bit, then it's got to be everybody's involved.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you and I, when we first met, I know they were kicking around some ideas at the state level about funds to do that and how do we. And I think I haven't heard the latest on that, but hopefully they're still working on it.
Yeah, that would be awesome. I mean, it would be. I mean, to have that kind of support and backing when you get in my opinion, when you get a whole community. When I say a whole community and a holistic approach, it's local government, it's the education sector, it's private, it's all of those things coming together and saying, yeah, this is good, and we can all give something to this because it's gonna help secure a better future for our community. Right. I think if you can gather all those right people in the room to push that initiative forward, I mean, it's gold.
Yeah. And I think the probably the unifying message, at least what I experienced, was always about job creation. So there's typically no disagreement that job creation is the number one factor of the healthy economy. 100%. And so usually that's the thing that when you're getting around a table and you've got to get disparate views, in alignment, that's the one thing everybody can say, okay, we can support that.
Yep. Yeah.
Stefanie, maybe you have an expansive business acumen as an entrepreneur, as an engineer. What are some of the most vivid memories, or what was your role in this community of aligned interests?
So and I had a minor role. I definitely wasn't the leader. Thankfully, there were people way more experienced than me that I got to learn from. But my role was it was called a portfolio executive, which meant that I had a portfolio of companies that I worked with the management teams of those companies to help them hit their milestones. So they would get investment. The investment would be based on certain milestones that was agreed upon with a company, and then somebody like me would be matched with the companies just to help them in whatever capacity they needed, whether it was whipping their product into shape or helping them with their marketing or getting their first products launched or helping with the regulatory environment, whatever they needed. That's where we would come in and basically be a free resource to the company that could have a loose management role with the teams to try to make sure, and of course they liked that because they knew we were there to help them reach their milestones.
Was there a standout company or product that you can highlight? What were you really excited about working on?
There were, I have to say, so I fell in love with every company I worked with. That's the problem. I had about at any one point in time, it was really taxing at the time. We had a very skinny staff. and each of us had about 20 to 25 companies that we were working with.
Oh, geez.
So it was a lot of work, but when you guys know, because you see it every day, when you're around passionate entrepreneurs that they're just like on fire about whatever they're doing, it's hard not for it to be contagious.
Sure.
And so you just live on that adrenaline. I mean, that's really what it is. Yeah, but a lot of really good companies that came out of the group for sure. And now since then, I think they've like tripled in size. I mean, the amount of growth that has happened has just been amazing. So.
And so, you just being in Pittsburgh, so you obviously keep in contact with a lot of those people you've been working with.
Yeah, and in fact, like one of the companies that I was, we would take a board observer seat too. So that's the other part is we could participate in strategy discussions. We didn't have an active role on the board. We were observers, but we could interface with the company, understand what they were struggling with, and also know how to help them. So that was very key. And one of the companies that I was on the board of, the CEO was, just a slam dunk CEO, really amazing. And now he's returning the favor, and he's on my board now.
Wow.
And so it's very much a peer relationship in that way, in that it's a trusting environment. You understand everybody's got their strengths and can learn from each other. So that was probably one of the best side effects.
Very cool.
That's awesome.
Stefanie, we definitely wanted to take advantage of this time with you and talk through some of like the educational components for our members, but also just because you have this wealth of knowledge working with so many people in your portfolio, we want your perspective on some of these fundamental things that kind of lay the groundwork for what we're doing here, So maybe I loved you. Jessica was telling me a little bit about the conversation that you had with her about some of these definitions, but she said your definition of an angel group was really clarifying. Can you kind of explain and differentiate what we're doing here versus other models that are out there?
Yeah, and I have no idea what I may have said, but that was
no
enlightening.
pressure. We got flashcards on that.
So angel models come in a variety of stripes. So there's, definitely the individual angel. It's a high net worth individual that has had his or her own fair share of success, loves the entrepreneurial environment, believes that they can help either with funds, with counseling, or a little of both. And they're all over the place. So there are a ton of those people. Sometimes they're a little more professional in their investments, and sometimes it's like the wild, wild west. So along the way, there's been different groups that have formed. Again, every community you go into, there's going to be a different level of organization. Some are very loose and just pull their members together. And if they, all agree on a company, they'll put a vehicle in place to make that investment. Others will say, hey, anyone that wants to invest, here's all the information. Everyone invests on their own as individual angels. That's not great for a company, by the way, because they've got a lot of then investors to manage. Yeah. And then there's ones that take on more of a professional role. They're usually segmented out into a pre-seed or seed fund where there's more guardrails around it, more safety around it in terms of how they make the investment and whether they take a board seat or not. etc. But we're, I think, in the middle of growing and defining that here at Legacy, and getting a little more professional in nature, meaning with education to our members, but also education with the companies, what we want out of a particular deal, what the entrepreneurs want out of a particular deal. So, I think it's fun to see the growth happening here.
Here's a fun one, because Matt loves when people say this. It's like sometimes Matt will tell people what we're doing, and they're like, "Oh, like Shark Tank."
Yeah.
Right. This is just like Brevard Shark Tank. So, can you explain maybe the difference between this and that, like the Shark Tank phenomenon? What has that done to people's perception of investing?
Yeah, so I've always watched Shark Tank like many other people. I love it as TV, as entertaining TV. I hate it for the startup world because it's really its own entertainment beast that has no reflection whatsoever on real life. Even though we've been lucky enough to have a company here in the area that's been very successful on Shark Tank, and the entrepreneur's amazing young lady that's just crushing it. But it's really a different world. So Shark Tank tends to focus on consumer goods. That's probably the biggest differentiator. That's the thing that those particular high net worth investors know the most, other than maybe Robert. And so there's different dynamics that go along with that. They can invest a lot less. They can get the company a lot further in terms of sales. But also behind the scenes, each one of those investors has a giant set of attorneys, people that do due diligence for them. They're all separate. So if you get an investment from 2 or 3 of those sharks on Shark Tank, you have to go through 2 or 3 processes to see who's actually going to be in the deal or not. We're in the world where there's a lot more risk, but the companies have a lot greater ability to hire not just a large number of people, but a large number of high-paying jobs. And again, it's back to the job creation, building the economy, building the local network of entrepreneurs so that they can become serial entrepreneurs and then also give back in terms of wealth. So it's a much more deep and broad experience than what you see on Shark Tank.
Anything to add to that, Matt? You agree?
I concur. So Shark Tank, yeah, it's absolutely, it is entertaining to watch. I love watching just for the entrepreneur to get to that point where they're on camera on Shark Tank is extremely difficult. And to see them do that and to make it to that point and to do their thing, I think it's absolutely wonderful. I love watching all of that. However, yeah, that's not what we do. That's not who we are. We have systems and processes and contacts and where we're surrounding these companies with whatever we can to help them get from here to here, and we're staying down the path with them for a very, very long time. And it's not. I mean, we have pitches here, but more times than not, it's very
like a conversation.
It's a conversation. Yeah, it's real. It's real life. It's real community. I'm gonna probably run into you at Publix. You know what I mean? So we're engaged with our entrepreneurs, with our members. There's a lot that happens kind of behind the scenes, to Stefanie's point. But our deal here, it's not centered on one entrepreneur and one investor. It's centered on a community of companies and people that will help that entrepreneur and their team, and a large community of investors who are offering their expertise and offer that. It's a whole different ball game.
And I think that's actually a big differentiator from what I've seen with other angel groups too, is that there is a lot of almost everyone will say they have a community focus.
Yeah.
Almost everyone does, but it's different to really rally around, especially at the angel level of things. It's very uncommon to rally around a company and help them with various expertise. And I know this is a repeat for you, Matt, because I tell you this all the time. But that one of the things I love the most is the eclectic group we have. So we've got small business owners that are wildly successful. We've got the corporate people, a lot of people with a DoD background experience, and then startup people. And so now when an entrepreneur comes in, they may be having a conversation with somebody that's never been in their industry or never will be in their industry, but they're taking away like incredible pieces of strategy that they wouldn't have been exposed to if they stayed in their own little world.
Yep.
And that value that can be garnered from that diversity is really, for me, it's super fun.
Absolutely. And one thing I run into, especially in Brevard County too, is, people are typically leery of this type of investing because they like to control their investment. While you invest in our companies, you can't necessarily control your investment. You have the ability to speak into the investment and to look at the entrepreneur and to provide them some experience or some education. I mean, so there's a sense of like, I'm contributing something here, and you don't have to. You can be a passive whatever, but if you want to, you can, and it's extremely beneficial. So it is fun to see when that happens, and anyway, but yeah.
Well said, Yo. That was clarifying. Let's discuss this. New angel investors, Stefanie. What should they expect stepping into this world? What are kind of some guardrails or expectations that you can help align for them? Maybe someone that's new to Legacy or just new to this world in general. What does an angel investor do? What's the standard or the protocol or best practice?
Yeah, there's not really, back to my maybe earlier comments that they come in all flavors. I mean, I wouldn't say there's really a standard, but for an entrepreneur that's going around and pitching, that's probably a great question. Like, how does your organization work? How involved do they get? What are they expecting to hear or see from us as a company? So there's a lot of vetting that the companies can do to make sure that they're aligned, or at least understand the expectations of any angel investor as an individual or a group. And then in terms of the members for us, I think that definitely come to one of the orientation or open invitations that we have, because you guys always will give a really nice overview of our current portfolio, how we operate, what our goals are. I love hearing that. I could hear it every single time and never get bored of it, because it just helps reconfirm, again, back to common missions. Like, this is what we want to do for the company. This is how we want our members to behave. This is how we look at investment. And so I think that's usually helpful, that anybody that's interested in angel investing should definitely come, not just the one, but maybe a couple of those. And then the other thing is, similar to what they tell you with stocks about not getting too emotionally involved and attached. I think it's just human nature. We fall into, every one of us falls into, oh, I know that industry, or oh, I know those kinds of products. And so the downside of that is you might think there's one way to tackle that market, or one way to tackle that product launch, or what have you. And again, I would advise any angel investor to learn from each other, because there's, again, such a breadth of knowledge that all these different ways to make a company successful. And then also detach yourself a little bit from the investments. And I think, Matt, that's where you do a good job too about explaining how much people could target basically as a target of investment over a long course of time to get the returns that they're hoping to get.
Yeah, well said.
Yeah, I have a. There's something too that just as you were talking, I was reminded. Everybody has their own set of the ways they want to invest, the types of companies they want to invest, and that's all great and that's all well good. I mean, you got to have your own investor strategy and stuff like that. I do sometimes encourage people. I don't advise them and say, "Hey, this is exactly the way you need to do it." But I say, for myself, I don't always have to understand the technology. Look, I'm a people guy. I have to trust that person knows what they're doing. And I'm not saying that anybody should do it this way, but you're going to see all kinds of things, and some of those things you're not going to fully understand every bit and piece and part. But you see the right person, you see a really cool product, you see a good strategy, you look around you and you see what other people who have that acumen, if they're investing in it or not. And there's a sense of don't be afraid to invest in something you don't
fully understand every single thing.
Thing. If I'm investing in a space company, I don't know how they launch it up into space. I don't know what the fuel they use. I don't understand some of these things, but I know that launches are successful, that they get up there, that they do their thing, and and that, okay, if this is the right person, they have look at their market, look at I can be like, okay, I can gamble a little bit there. I trust that. I think that something that I run into a lot is that, I really don't understand how that fuel is going to be blah blah blah. Okay. Are you a rocket scientist? No.
Well, and that's a good opportunity for to do if maybe not that person does the due diligence, but refer to a subject matter expert on that particular topic that can say, this is how everybody does it. Here's what this company's doing different. Here's why we're optimistic about it. So there are ways to solve, to satisfy that gap. And I will actually piggyback on that, because it's a topic that we run into all the time. The whole reason angel investing is even a thing is because there's stages of investment, and they become more dollar amounts later on, but also the company's more mature later on. And so later stage is when a company's really full throttle. They're out in the market. They're selling like, hotcakes, but they're trying to grow or go global or, so obviously an angel is not going to be, the angels invest at the very earliest stage, the first stage of the company before institutional investors get involved. So by definition, there's going to be warts in every company or holes or what have you. There's going to be, they don't have the team yet. They don't have the product finished. They don't understand they kind of understand the market, but they don't understand it fully. I mean, there could be any one of those things, or they don't have their sales channels established yet, or they're working on their manufacturing. I mean, again, the list goes on. And the goal in the angel world is to identify, okay, what are they all over? What do they totally have under control? What are they still working on? Because they're going to be working on all of that. What are they still working on? The reason I love this group, what can we help them with? Like, who can we align them with? Who can we connect them to? How can we help them get over that hurdle? And so, our group, when we're looking at investing in companies, it's really with the notion of what does the company need to get to that next stage? And do we feel like we have the resources or can get the resources or the introductions to support them to do everything possible to make them successful? Because if we do everything possible to make them successful, they're going to get to that next round. We're going to have a liquidation event, and then it comes full circle. So that's really the model at this stage is to get them to graduate out of our portfolio to that next level. We make some money on that and turn around and do the same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, well said.
You say that so well.
No doubt you got it down pat, Stefanie. And then as an investor, I mean, what are, Matt's talking about some of the fundamentals that he's looking for in a company, like a lot to do with the people themselves, we got to make that judgment. But I mean, are there other fundamentals you're looking for, even if you're not an industry expert? What are you looking for in a startup when you're doing due diligence that are green flags, red flags?
Yeah. So I mean, there's a handful. Most people know, the 10 or so things that you look at for a company. So some of this might be repeat, but so I'll tell you some differences that I look for when we're looking at the team. Some people will want a full-fledged team. Again, at this angel stage, I think that's kind of silly because that means one of two things: either the people are not employed and they're all working they're all working without getting paid. Very hard to assemble a full team that way. People have families, they've got obligations, they've got mortgages to pay, so it's very hard. Or they are right out of school, still living at home. And then you've got the inexperience. So they might be. So I don't really look at that like having a full-fledged team as a must-have. What I care more about is who will you be hiring, and do you have an understanding of who you need, why you need them, who your first and second and third hires are. Is that team, whether it be one person, two people, three people, are they transparent? That's a big indicator for me. If they are transparent of here's where we're crushing it, here's where we're really struggling, I love that person. I'm like, okay, that's a person I can believe in, I can work with, and they're not going to feel like they have to mislead you down the line. So if people are too rosy or not transparent or won't answer questions directly, so I look at those things when I'm looking at the team. Then when it comes to the product, most people like to see some kind of proof of concept or a little further along. It depends on the industry whether you need intellectual property or not. In most of the industries that are high-tech jobs, it becomes important. So same kind of deal. They may not have everything done, but I want to understand what is their understanding of their intellectual property position. Do they even know if they need a patent or not? Do they know what you do if you get one? Yep. So I'll dig a little deeper just to understand their knowledge of that. Then in terms of market and sales, this is where I'm probably the maybe most strict market sales and how you make money. And I know you guys know this from talking to me, but this is an area where I think people don't put enough effort because they say big market, here's how we're going to go sell, and they have got like one idea that's not very deep. And a lot of people don't put a financial model together. And when they don't do those things, that tells me, okay, they really have not thought through how are they going to tackle their market, really what are they going to do in terms of tactical sales strategy. And then how can we believe any numbers that they say if they didn't flesh all that out with some assumptions? So I think that's where most companies are actually the weakest, and would be wise to really think through that. Even if they're wrong, it's okay, but think through it so that you have a starting point.
Like everything you're talking through here is really solid stuff. Maybe like with the companies that you're working with, we like to ask this question. I mean, do you see mistakes at this early stage that you could maybe like warn or kind of like share your experience of mistakes you see companies make early on that you've caught or been able to fix or work out of?
And it's probably what I just said. The lack of a financial model is one of the worst. A lot of entrepreneurs especially if they're fast paced and they're very busy, they view that as busy work or not worth their time. But again, that tells me they haven't thought through their market or their sales or how they're going to tackle it, how they're really going to tackle even hiring or their spending or where their assumptions are. And for an investor, investors care very much about, okay, what are the assumptions that you're making that is the basis for your projections? And if you can't say that, if an entrepreneur can't say that succinctly to anybody that asks a question, that'll be a big problem. So that's probably one of the biggest mistakes. And then the other is and it's because of Shark Tank, focusing too much on the show and not on the substance. And that's another reason why I do love our group, because we do have a dialogue. I think it's much more revealing and actually more helpful to all parties to have a bit of a pitch, but also a lot of dialogue with the company, because that's just more, it's more relevant than just being really good at a pitch.
I've watched Stefanie in action too, because we do interview companies, and there's I'm not gonna say the name, but there's one in particular. I watched this kind of flesh out, and it's not the first time I've watched this flesh out 1,000 times, but because you're here, I want to kind of talk about it. I mean, really cool product, cool different IP and different things kind of going on. Had all these different pieces, but when you were interviewing, you're trying to get to the point where there was I don't know. I need help.
Yeah.
Haven't thought about that. Could you help me with that?
Yeah.
Trying to get to a point to where in that particular interview, we could get the founder to express some level of authenticity and humility and figure out, like, can we work with this person? Because that's really what you're trying to figure out. Because you don't want them. I don't want them to have all of the answers, because that tells me they think they know everything. That's dangerous for an entrepreneur. For an entrepreneur to be like, yeah, I'm going to have all the answers. I'm going to know everything. I'm going to know. Yes, I get it, but also no, I don't want you to be. I want you to be good at what you're good at, and I want someone else to be good at what they're good at. I don't want you to be like, because you're going to half-ass a lot of things, and that's coming from experience of, if you try and do it all, and so in this particular case, we didn't move down the path. We're not going to move down the path with that company, because we got to a point to where it would appear as though that's a ceiling we're going to hit all the way down the road with that entrepreneur. And if they're not teachable, if they're not willing to say, I don't know, but I'll find out for you. If they're not saying, hey, please help me in this area. We have a really cool thing here, but we need help. We don't know this.
And I'll say if it's the same one I'm thinking of, the weird thing about that was if an investor is willing to say or has knowledge to say, hey, in this particular industry, this typically happens. How will you tackle that? And they won't acknowledge the statement. They'll just, we'll just go off on a different tangent. That's probably a big red flag.
Dodging the question, trying to read,
and especially when you're trying to help them. Like, look, you're going to run into a problem here. How will you tackle it? And if the response back is more, there isn't a problem.
Right.
That's not good.
Also, too, I would say for any entrepreneur who's going to bring their team with them to do a pitch, let your team pitch. You do what you do. If your team member is if your CFO's with you, let him talk the financials. If your branding person's with them, let them talk the marketing and the branding strategy. Let your team be involved, because we're not just interviewing the visionary. We're not just interviewing the person with the idea. We want to know what their support structure looks like.
And it adds, it's such a good thing for the company to do that, because it gives an appreciation of the depth that's involved in the company.
Yeah.
And so it's almost never a bad thing. Like it's always like, okay, they've got some rock star people that are involved with the company. Yeah, it's usually a good thing.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And that's reassuring as well, Stephanie, that you were talking about. I mean, just by nature, at this early of a stage, there's just things that are underdeveloped. It's that humbling experience on entrepreneurship, Stephanie, let's see. Let's talk about like the Brevard ecosystem, specifically like these Florida-based companies that you've come down to now start vetting, seeing trends, and figuring out where the opportunities are. What kind of trends are you seeing as far as what's being developed here, what's working, what's not working? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I've gotten the most exposure through Legacy, seeing it, which has been, again, a lot of fun for me. And it really opened my eyes to how much is going on that I had no idea was going on, because we all live in our own little world, and you think you have the lay of the land, especially in an area like ours where it's kind of easy to master. You get a false sense of knowing everything that's going on around town, and I had no idea that there was so much more going on. So actually, everybody that Matt's brought through has really been enlightening, and for our members, I think that's a fair statement for everybody to say, wow. I really had no idea of everything from life sciences to software development to B2B companies, some consumer goods. I mean, it's really a nice breadth of companies, but all were surprising to me. So I don't know that there's a trends yet. I think we're maybe at that nice early level where people are starting to actually get excited about the startup world. Yep. And they're like, there's startups happening here, and as we know, but maybe people outside our area don't know, we have so much expertise here that is preceding that bubble where, the more people that are working in the current companies around town get excited knowing that when it's time for them to maybe move on from their current company, it is a viable startup scene. I think we're going to see more of that.
Yeah, and that's really cool to hear from someone that settled here from a really vibrant startup economy. Very cool.
Yeah, it's been neat to watch over the years. I mean, how many years have you lived here now?
15.
15.
Wow.
I can't get over that.
So you were here when Groundswell started too.
Yeah.
And Groundswell was getting started. I started Legacy 6 months after they were getting really rolling. But it's the startup community has a nice path forward in Brevard. It really does.
Yeah.
And you have the incubation, you have the kind of maybe more of an accelerator or more of a, but we're a group of investors who care about the community. You have this, you have all the tech ecosystem that kind of is surrounding it, where if there's something a company needs, 8-9 times out of 10, you can find it here. If you can't find it right here, you can find it in Orlando. You can find it in some of the surrounding areas. Like there's so much of a great support structure here for this type of ecosystem and this type of community to grow and to thrive. I'm just super excited about the longevity of this, how we are just getting started. And to your point, we're already seeing all kinds of cool things. I can only imagine what it's going to be like in 2 years, and 4 years, and 10 years, and how this is going to continue to develop. And so I'm hoping that that the community starts to recognize it to the point that they're not just happy about it or optimistic about it, but that they join it, that they come and they be a part of it. You know, whether you're going to be a mentor over at Groundswell, you're going to join Legacy Angel Network, maybe both. It would be amazing to start to see the community even come out more and more and more and get involved in this. And I think there's little things that we can do to amplify that, and we're working on a couple of things. But
I'm excited. I'm excited for that too, and I think it's a perfect opportunity to really set the community culture around it. Like, just that reinforcing kind of some of the things we said. That look, startups are still in their formation stage, so that's got to be an expectation. And we're here to help them get to a level of success, not judge them like Shark Tank, where it's all kind of shitty comments towards them, and then deciding whether you're going to throw in 10,000 or not. Like, that's not really what we're doing.
You're dead to me.
Yeah,
that does set a weird precedence. I didn't even think of it that way.
Yeah, I mean,
like you, like
it's
the
supposed
cockroach
to be
you are.
Drama and
Right.
grill these people and
And it's terrible. We are in a position, and Groundswell is in a position, and the universities and the tech companies are all in a position to say, no, we want this in our community.
Yep. Yeah. And to your point too, like that's, I can't tell you how many times I meet a founder and they are petrified.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot, Shark Tank. Come on. Yeah, but they are. Like they have this perception of what it's going to be like, and they are scared to death.
Well, it's kind of like the HGTV, what they do when you're house hunting. They go in and say really horrible things about the house, and they feel like they did something wonderful because they could point out all the flaws. And unfortunately, when you watch Shark Tank, and when you in defense of the entrepreneurs, when you've met with a lot of angels that are not, it's amazing how many terrible things come out of people's mouths when you're trying to have a conversation with them. But it's prevalent, and so I'm sure we are absolutely different. That when companies come here and they're not treated so antagonistically, they're shocked. Because most angel groups, I won't say most, a lot of angel groups are like that. They are really harsh, and their mindset is really to dig and dig and dig to find the hole that exists, and then say, we're not interested, and constantly deflating the companies and the entrepreneurs, which is exactly the wrong model. The only way investors make money is if they help make help get the company successful. So,
100%. And there's so much pride and arrogance and a need to perform and be seen by a lot of the people that do that.
Yeah.
And it's human nature. If I want to feel bigger, I'm going to make somebody else feel smaller, and it drives me up a wall when I see that.
Yeah.
And what also, on the flip side, what also drives me up a wall is when you're offering constructive advice to an entrepreneur and they're getting angry with you.
Yeah.
So let me encourage entrepreneurs. Don't be an ass.
Yeah.
Okay. If someone is sitting in front of you and they're taking their time to offer you, even if they're not going to invest in you, but they say, hey, look, maybe you're not to that point yet. May I suggest this?
Yeah.
Don't defend. Just listen.
Right.
Even if they're wrong. Just listen.
And thank them for their input, because it could be something that you just hadn't thought of before, or you thought wasn't relevant to your industry, and then 6 months later you're like, you know what, that actually could be a good idea.
Yeah.
I mean, I agree totally.
100%. It's I had a guy in here the other day. He's I couldn't get him to leave. I was trying to get him to leave, but he was blowing me up. But I was trying to help him and just saying, look, you're missing this, this, and this, and it's not really ready. It's a cool idea, but it's not, And I was offering him some feedback, saying, hey, go try and do this, go try and do this, go try and do this, and And he just could not, and he had a partner with him, and his partner was embarrassed. But this guy just would not let it go.
Yeah, and that's the really unfortunate thing about that is the guidance you were giving him could probably tee him up to come back.
Yeah.
Right? So it might not be the right match today, but 2 months from now it might be perfect. It might be, the stars might align. So it's really unfortunate that he didn't at least take notes and say, okay, keep the relationship somewhat warm.
Yeah, and that's the thing. To your point, like, now I'm definitely not going to invest in you. Even if you came back and had all of the answers.
Yeah.
I know that the relationship, because if our model is to go down the path, we're not just going to drop money and say, okay, I really hope this works. We're going to go down the path. If I can't go down a path with you, if you can't go down a path with an entrepreneur, if we can't do that, we're just not going to do it.
Yeah.
We're not going to take the risk because it's the headache is not worth it.
Yep.
And if I don't like you, if I think you're an ass, I would be doing all of my members a disservice by letting them meet you.
Yeah, let me tell you, you have to work.
Am I right?
It's totally true.
Yeah.
You have to work really hard for Matt not to like you, man.
That's the thing is, it's always shocking to me. It's true. It's always shocking to me if there's like some kind of tension when it comes to you and another person, because it just is so rare.
Yeah.
It really is.
It takes a lot for me to.
But like what you two are both good at. You tell or you give good advice and the truth, like even if it's hard, but in a cadence where you just don't have to have that aggressive demeanor as an investor to get things done, And it opens up the opportunity, like other relational opportunities that you might not get if you're just grilling the person, So I hope that we remain in kind of, or like keep and spread that part of the culture here.
Something that I want to continue to improve on, is how we say no as well. Like I think there's always room for improvement on that. I think I've mentioned this in a previous episode, 5, 6, 8, 10, 12 episodes ago. But I was up at an event. One of the companies that we or funds that we actually do some stuff with is up in Baltimore. And I was at they're on their second fund, and I was up there and chatting and whatever. And the guy that runs the fund got up on stage and said, we build our brand on how we say no. Because they say no 99% of the time. And they get probably 500-600 applications plus a year. And they do a one-pager for every company. And they say, hey, this is what we like, this is what we didn't like, or that what we didn't like, but why it doesn't work for us. We suggest A, B, C, and D, and then that's it. And then, but they're kind. They understand that the person that's in front of them is a human being with a dream, and they're kind. They help as much as they can, and then they send them off, and they send them off well. I want to continue. I want to continue for our group to grow in that. Because I think that when a community understands that we're not just trying to make money on the community, we're trying to help the community, we're trying to grow the community. I think that that's something that ultimately we want to be known for. And sometimes I think we miss the boat on that because we're running around like chickens with our head cut off, and sometimes we're just busy. And that's something we could always improve on, always do better.
And
Very
there,
cool,
especially because our community is one where it's we're not a big giant city where you lose track of people the next day. Like if you're in Chicago, you go pitch somewhere, you get a no, they're moving on. You may never see that person ever again.
Right.
We're in a community, like you mentioned before, where we are going to definitely see everybody again.
Yeah.
So a no today doesn't mean a no for forever.
Right.
Or a no today might mean, okay, things were still maybe too fledgling for an investment, but again, we think of something 6 months later of a resource that company could use.
Right.
It's just good business to have good relationships.
Yeah, and I've learned that lesson. In the hard way. There's someone that in this community that I care about, that I respect, and I didn't tell them no well. I wasn't rude, but they were expecting more from me than I realized. And when I called them up a year later to see if they still needed assistance, call didn't go that great. Because I didn't say no well.
Yeah.
And so it's just lessons that you learn and that you try and you take that and you pivot and you move forward. But yeah.
We like to ask a final question. Stephanie, you want to ask me?
Yeah. This is my little emotional question I like to ask everybody.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, that's not. I mean, I don't think you're going to cry, but if you cry,
it's great content.
It's really good content. Where's our person that brings the fake tears?
Yeah.
We're gonna do a couple little drops. No, I mean, it's really kind of a two-parter. What motivates Stefanie? What is your inner compass? Something that you just kind of live by, that kind of defines you. And then, what advice would you give people who are thinking about taking a risk of being an entrepreneur? And what advice would you offer them?
Okay. So the first question, I would say, one thing that we all know that's indisputable is that we're only on this earth for a finite number of years, whether that be 20 or 90, it's in the grand scheme of things, it's not very long. So I just fully believe that, your efforts should be improving, we should challenge ourselves. What are you doing to improve the quality of life of other humans, other animals, the world around us, and are you leaving the world a better place than what you came into? So, and if you do that, regardless of your occupation or industry or vocation, that you did what you were supposed to while you were here. So that's the first thing.
I'm going to stop you a second. Thank you. That was. Connor needed to hear that.
I did. Every once in a while.
No.
You need that reminder.
No, that's absolutely one of my favorite answers so far from all of our episodes. That's spot on.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
And then the second, and that's quite frankly, that's from losing people. I think the more people you lose that are meaningful to you, changes your perspective. It absolutely changes your perspective, and you can either withdraw or decide, okay, I'm only here for some number. I don't know what the answer is. So, and so what are you doing with yourself?
I just this last weekend went and said goodbye to my 98-year-old grandfather, and held my 8-week-old granddaughter.
Wow.
And so I was working with those emotions this weekend and trying to juggle that the beginning of this beautiful life and the ending of this beautiful life, and 98 years is a long time, but it is fine. He had 98. I may not have 98. Right. I may not have tomorrow.
Yeah.
So it's, I think what you understanding that and then taking each day and being like, what can I do today? That is good for me and good for my soul and good for the people around me. And I think it's beautiful. Yeah. So back to your thing. I'm sorry.
And then advice for somebody that's thinking of taking a risk. Some just really practical. Save as much money as possible before you do it, because there's not going to be, it is a luxury to have a company that's paying your salary and benefits and your vacations and all your perks. And so if you're going into taking a risk, you got to be very practical about that, of saving as much money as possible to make that leap. To always focus on resilience. That's I think the biggest differentiator between people that can persevere and those that give it up, is how resilient you are. And then I had a business coach that said this to me, and I laughed at the time, but he's 100% right. Is he said, look, if you're doing anything worthwhile, you're going to get punched in the head every day. And he said, literally, something is going to blindside you. People are going to be really mean. Competitors are going to try to knock you out from your knees. I mean, it's not for the weak. It's not for the weak, and it's not for the thin skin. So you have to just mentally know that that's the environment and care so much about what you're doing that you can remind yourself, I'm resilient, and I'm going to take those hits, and I'm going to keep on going.
Yeah, that's powerful stuff.
Oh my gosh, that's gold.
Stefanie, we're so glad you joined us. Every time you talk about Pittsburgh, I just start thinking about Primanti Brothers, which is the problem. I don't know if there's anybody. Are you familiar with Primanti Brothers?
No.
Oh man, you got it. Can you just describe what that sandwich is? That's like a classic Pittsburgh.
It's a restaurant that's been around for 100 years, and they used to. I think the origin is they used to make these for the guys working in the mills, where they would come to the city and get these sandwiches. But they used to be like 6 inches high, like just all this, like tons of meat, deli meat, and coleslaw and French fries and pretty much every single thing in your meal on one big giant sandwich, and you have to kind of squish it to try to take a bite out of it.
It's just like it perishes in like an hour. You know what I mean?
And
it's just like a mess.
Became
French
hugely
fries and coleslaw.
popular after the bars. After you go into a game or whatnot, or if you're out dancing all night and drinking, and then it got the whole younger crowd into it, and so they've been around for forever. I think there's one in Miami too. Actually,
is there really?
I think so.
Wow!
And,
all right.
Yeah,
we got to make a trip.
So
it's just a greasy, yummy,
One of our
junk
partners owns a couple of planes. I think we need to plan a little field trip one day.
For Manny Brothers lunch that would be the thing.
Miami or Pittsburgh. I mean, I've been to Miami. I'd rather go to Pittsburgh, but we all pitch in for some fuel and we take a little trip and get that. That sounds amazing.
Worth it.
Guys tend to love it. Yeah.
Stefanie, thanks so much for joining us. We really had a great time.
Thank you, guys. Cheers.
Thanks for listening, everybody. Yeah.